NTHE scream was swallowed by the thick insulated walls of our custom-built home. It was a raw, primal sound torn from the depths of my soul, a sound of agony and terror. I was on all fours on the plush, cream-colored carpet of our master bedroom, my body convulsing with a pain so immense it felt like I was being split in two. My water had broken an hour ago, a sudden, shocking gush that had woken me from a fitful sleep. NBUT, the other side of the king-sized bed, was empty. Cold NMY husband, Liam, wasn't there. He wasn't rushing to my side, he wasn't calling an ambulance. He was just down the hall, in the guest room. I knew this because I had seen him go in there hours earlier, after another one of our quiet, tense arguments. "I need a good night's sleep, Kate," he had said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have that big presentation tomorrow. I can't be disturbed." "Liam!" I screamed his name, my voice cracking. "Liam! It's time! The baby is coming!" NTHE only response was the faint, rhythmic hum of the air purifier from under the guest room door. He didn't hear me. Or he didn't want to. My pain, the birth of our first child, was less important than his presentation. It was a disturbance to his perfectly scheduled life. And panic, cold and sharp, sliced through the pain. I was alone. Truly alone. The contractions were coming faster now, one crashing into the next, giving me no time to breathe. I crawled, dragging my heavy body across the floor towards the nightstand where my phone was charging. It felt miles away. With a final, desperate lunge, I grabbed it, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I managed to dial 911, my words a choked, breathless plea. "My husband. He's here, but he's sleeping. Please, the baby is coming now." As the operator's calm voice tried to guide me, another wave of pain hit, and the phone slipped from my slick hand, skittering across the hardwood floor. I was on my own. And in that moment, as my body gave a final, involuntary push and I felt the baby's head crown, I heard it. Through the wall, faint but unmistakable. A soft, peaceful snore. He was sleeping. He was dreaming. While I was living a nightmare, my pain didn't even ripple the surface of his perfect, undisturbed rest. And I knew, with a clarity that burned brighter than the agony, that I would make sure he woke up to a world he would never recognize. NIF, you're already holding your breath, please. Show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing. You have to witness the rude awakening this man is about to get. NLIAM didn't just live his life, he designed it. He was an architect, not just by profession, but in his very soul. Everything was a blueprint, a carefully constructed plan, where every line had a purpose and every angle was precise. Our life together was his masterpiece. He designed our house, a stunning minimalist structure of glass and steel. He designed our vacations, with detailed itineraries planned down to the minute. He even designed our social life, curating a circle of friends who were synergistic with our brand. And I fell in love with that precision. I was a freelance writer, a creature of chaos and creativity. My life was a messy collage of deadlines, inspiration, and clutter. Liam's structured world felt like a sanctuary. He brought order to my chaos. He organized my finances, streamlined my workflow, and even color-coded my closet. "There's a more efficient way to live, Kate," he would say, and I believed him. He was my architect, and I was happy to live in the beautiful, orderly house he was building for our future. NHI's desire for control was rooted in his childhood. He was the son of two free-spirited artists who had raised him in a commune, a life of beautiful, unpredictable chaos that he secretly hated. He craved structure the way a desert wanderer craves water. He saw his parents, life not as free but as a failure of planning. His entire existence was a reaction to that, a relentless pursuit of order and control. When we decided to have a baby, it wasn't a spontaneous, emotional decision. It was a project. Project Procreation. He had jokingly called it, but he wasn't really joking. He created a timeline, a budget, and a detailed plan. He read every book, consulted with every expert. He tracked my ovulation cycles on a shared spreadsheet. It was the most romantic thing he had ever done, in his own, uniquely methodical way. NTHE first sign that my role in his design was merely functional came during the pregnancy. He was fascinated by the process, but emotionally detached from the reality. He would talk about the baby's development in terms of gestational milestones, and fetal growth metrics. He never just put his hand on my belly to feel the baby kick. He would ask, "Is the fetus exhibiting expected levels of motor activity for this stage?"
He designed the nursery with the precision of a master architect. It was a marvel of minimalist design and ergonomic efficiency. But it was cold. It was a showroom, not a sanctuary. When I tried to add a personal touch, a hand-painted mobile I had made, a soft, worn teddy bear from my own childhood, he would gently remove them. "They don't fit the aesthetic, Kate," he'd say. "They disrupt the design." NTHE arguments started then. Quiet, tense disagreements that always ended with me conceding. I was too emotional, not thinking logically. He was the architect. He knew best. I was a decorative element in his grand design, and I was starting to clash with the furniture. NTHE, final weeks of the pregnancy were the worst. He became obsessed with the quote-quote birth plan, a multi-page document he had drafted with contingencies and flowcharts. He scheduled the exact date for my induction, a day that fit perfectly between two of his major project deadlines. When my doctor advised against it, suggesting we let the baby come on its own time, Liam saw it as an unacceptable deviation from the plan. "Nature is inefficient," he told the doctor, much to her astonishment. NTHE night I went into labor was 2 days before the scheduled induction. It was an unplanned, messy, human event, and it threw his entire blueprint into chaos. We had a small argument over dinner. I was feeling anxious and wanted to talk. He was trying to rehearse his presentation for the next day. Frustrated, he stood up. "I need to be sharp tomorrow, Kate," he said, his voice clipped. "This presentation is worth millions to the firm. I can't afford any distractions. I'm sleeping in the guest room." He walked out, leaving me alone with my plate, my fear, and the first, faint twinges of a contraction. He wasn't just choosing his work over me. He was choosing his perfect, orderly plan over the beautiful, messy reality of our life. And NTHE contractions started as a whisper, a gentle tightening in my lower back. I told myself it was just Braxton Hicks, my body rehearsing. I didn't want to disturb him. I didn't want to be another inefficient variable in his carefully planned evening. I drew a warm bath, trying to breathe through the tightening waves, my mind replaying his cold dismissal over and over. I can't afford any distractions. Was that what I was? A distraction? An hour later, the whispers became insistent murmurs. The pain was real, radiating around my front. I got out of the bath, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I walked to the guest room door, my hand raised to knock, but I hesitated. I could hear the low murmur of his voice inside. He was on the phone, likely with his business partner, running through his presentation one last time. I stood there, paralyzed by years of conditioning, of being told my feelings were secondary to his logic. I didn't knock. I went back to our bedroom alone. It was when my water broke that the murmurs became a roar. The pain was no longer a wave. It was a tsunami, pulling me under. The scream that tore from my throat was involuntary, a sound of pure animal instinct. "Liam!" I cried out, my voice swallowed by the soundproof walls he had been so proud of. I screamed his name until my throat was raw, but the house remained silent. Still, NTHE crawl to the phone was the longest journey of my life. Every inch was a battle against a fresh wave of agony. After the desperate fumbled call to 911 and the sickening clatter of the phone falling out of reach, a terrifying calm washed over me. I was completely, utterly alone. The paramedics wouldn't make it in time. My body was taking over, and this baby was coming right here, on this expensive carpet that Liam had chosen for its neutral, calming tones. NTHE irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. Here I was, in the heart of the perfect world he had designed, experiencing the most chaotic, primal, and beautifully human moment of my life, and the architect was sleeping peacefully just down the hall. His dream, his presentation, his orderly world was more important than this, more important than me, more important than our child. As the final all-consuming contraction seized me, I gave in to it. I bore down with a strength I didn't know I possessed, a strength born of rage and a fierce, protective love for the child I was bringing into this cold, silent house. And then there was a release, a sudden, shocking quiet, and a new sound, a tiny, furious cry in Ampul. My daughter was here. She was lying on the carpet, slick and beautiful and impossibly small. I pulled her to my chest, sobbing with relief, with exhaustion, with a love so fierce it burned away the pain. I wrapped her in the cashmere throw from the end of the bed, and as I held her, listening to her cries echo in the silent room, I heard it again, the soft, rhythmic snore from down the hall. My pain hadn't disturbed his dreams. My daughter's first cry hadn't disturbed his dreams. But I would. Oh, I would. I would become the one variable he could never control, the one flaw in his perfect design. I would be the storm that leveled his beautiful, empty house to the ground. NNTHE paramedics burst through the front door like a whirlwind of efficiency. Their calm, professional voices, a stark contrast to the chaos of the scene. They found me on the floor, clutching my newborn daughter, the umbilical cord still connecting us, a testament to my solitary battle. One team immediately swarmed around me and the baby, their movements swift and sure. They clamped and cut the cord, wrapped my daughter in a thermal blanket, and checked her vitals. Another paramedic tended to me, his voice a soothing balm as he took my blood pressure and covered me with a warm blanket. "You did it, Mama," he said, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You're both incredible." As they were preparing to move us, a police officer who had arrived with the ambulance walked down the hallway. He stopped at the guest room door, from which the faint sound of snoring was still audible. He knocked, firmly. "Sir? This is the police. You need to open the door." There was a muffled groan, then the sound of movement. The door opened, and Liam stood there, blinking in the hallway light. He was wearing expensive silk pajamas, his hair perfectly in place. He looked confused, annoyed. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice thick with sleep. "What's all the noise?" "I have a big—" NHI's words died in his throat as he saw the scene. The paramedics, the police officer, the gurney in the hallway. His eyes followed the officer's gaze into the master bedroom, where I was now sitting up, holding our daughter, a paramedic by my side. NTHE color drained from his face. The annoyance was replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. "Kate?" he whispered. "What? What happened?" "She had a baby, sir," the police officer said, his voice dripping with an icy contempt I will never forget. "While you were sleeping." NLIAM just stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. His perfectly designed world had been shattered, not by an earthquake or a fire, but by the messy, unpredictable miracle of life. He hadn't been in control. He hadn't even been present. He had been asleep. NTHE paramedic helping me looked from Liam's stunned face to mine. "Is this your husband?" he asked gently. I just nodded, unable to speak. The paramedic's jaw tightened. "We're taking your wife and daughter to the hospital now," he said to Liam, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You can follow in your car." As they wheeled me out of the house, I saw Liam standing frozen in the hallway, a ghost in his own home. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a panic I had never seen before. It wasn't concern for me or the baby. It was the terror of an architect watching his blueprint burn. He had missed the most important event of his life, not because of an emergency or a tragedy, but because he had prioritized his own comfort, his own schedule, his own perfect plan. He had slept through the birth of his daughter, and the look on his face told me he was just beginning to understand that he had woken up to a nightmare of his own making. NNTHE hospital was a haven. The nurses fussed over me and my daughter, whom I named Aurora, after the dawn she had brought into my life. They had heard the story from the paramedics, and I was treated with a mixture of awe and fierce, protective sympathy. They called me a warrior. They brought me food, they helped me with the baby, and they created a warm, safe cocoon for me. NLIAM arrived a few hours later. He came into the room bearing a ridiculously large bouquet of roses, his face a mask of strained remorse. "Kate," he began, his voice oozing a contrition that was as designed as everything else in his life. "I am so sorry. I don't know what to say." I was just so exhausted, so stressed. And I looked at him, at this stranger who was my husband, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, clear emptiness. "You slept," I said, my voice flat. That's all there is to say. He tried to touch Aurora, who was sleeping in the bassinet beside me, but I moved to block his path. "Don't," I said, the single word, a wall of ice. "You don't get to touch her. You weren't there." The look of shock on his face was profound. He was used to me conceding, to me accepting his logic. He wasn't prepared for this cold, unyielding stranger. He left the room, defeated, and for the first time in our relationship, I felt a surge of power. While I was in the hospital, I made a call. Not to a divorce lawyer, not yet. I called my older brother Mark. Mark was the opposite of Liam in every way. He was a loud, messy, and brilliantly successful tech entrepreneur who had built his empire on chaos and instinct. He had always disliked Liam, calling him a sentient spreadsheet. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling but firm, "I need your help. I need to leave him. But he controls everything. The house, the bank accounts, everything is in his name, in his company's name. It's all part of his asset protection strategy. I have nothing." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Mark's voice, low and dangerous. "He did what?" "He slept through it." "Okay, Katie, don't you worry. The architect is about to find out his foundations are rotten. We're not just getting you out. We're going to take his whole damn building down." Mark's plan was not one of quiet separation. It was a corporate raid. He flew in the next day and assembled a team, a forensic accountant, a ruthless female divorce attorney who specialized in dismantling the empires of wealthy men, and a public relations expert. They set up a war room in his hotel suite. Liam's mistake, Mark explained, pacing the room like a caged tiger, is that he thinks his life is a fortress. But every fortress has a weakness. His is his reputation. An architect's career is built on trust, precision, and attention to detail. The story of a man who sleeps through the birth of his own child because of a presentation, that's not just bad optics. That's professional poison. NTHE plan was simple and brutal. We would use his own obsession with design and reputation against him. The forensic accountant began digging into the complex web of corporations and trusts through which Liam funneled his money and owned his assets, looking for the flaws in his design. The lawyer began drafting a lawsuit that would hit him from every angle. And my job, they told me, was to do nothing, to stay quiet, to let him think he could fix this, that he could redesign the narrative. We were going to let him build a bridge of apologies, and then we were going to blow it up. NNLIAM spent the next few weeks trying to rebuild his broken blueprint. He flooded me with gifts, apologies, and promises. He hired a therapist, claiming he was working on his emotional availability. He even started a college fund for Aurora, a grand gesture he made sure to tell all our friends about. He thought he was repairing the damage. He didn't realize he was just handing us more ammunition. NHE was so focused on managing me that he didn't see the real threat coming. The forensic accountant, a quiet genius named Anya, found the flaw in his fortress. Liam had been using his corporate accounts to pay for our personal life, the house, the cars, the vacations, classifying them as business expenses. It was a common trick among the wealthy to minimize taxes, but it was also highly illegal. More importantly, in his arrogance, he had listed me as a non-executive board member on several of these shell corporations, a title I had never even known I held. He had done it years ago, likely for some obscure tax benefit, never imagining it would give me power. "He didn't just build you a house, Kate," Anya said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "He made you a partner in his scheme. You have a legal right to half of everything he was hiding. NTHAT was the key. The weapon we needed, NTHE demolition, began on a Tuesday. It was the day of his big presentation. the one he had slept through my labor for, rescheduled for the company's board of directors. It was the pinnacle of his career, the project that would make him a legend. An hour before the presentation, our lawyer, a shark named Diana, filed the lawsuit. It was a work of art, detailing not just the emotional neglect, but the financial fraud. Simultaneously, Mark's PR expert leaked the story. Not the whole story, just the most damning, unforgettable detail. $1 million architect sleeps through birth of first child to prepare for presentation. NTHE story hit the internet like a lightning strike. It was irresistible. It was the ultimate story of a man whose priorities were so profoundly skewed it was almost comical. It went viral within minutes. Liam walked into that boardroom, confident and prepared, completely unaware that his world was burning down around him. He began his presentation. 5 minutes in, the CEO of the company stopped him. He had just received a text message from his wife with a link to the story. An awkward silence fell over the room as every board member pulled out their phone. NLIAM stood there, his smile faltering, as he watched his reputation, the foundation of his entire life, turn to dust in real time. He saw the looks on their faces change from respect to disbelief, then to contempt. The presentation was over. His career was over. And as he was stumbling out of the boardroom in a daze, he was met by a process server who handed him the lawsuit. He looked at the papers, at the accusations of fraud, at my name listed as the plaintiff. The architect, the master planner, had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. His blueprint was in flames. NNTHE fallout was swift and total. The story was a late-night talk show punchline, a meme, a cautionary tale about work-life balance that was so extreme it became legendary. Liam became a professional pariah overnight. No client would trust an architect whose defining characteristic was a catastrophic lack of attention to the most important details of life. The firm fired him, citing the reputational damage and the impending legal battle over his financial misconduct. NTHE legal fight was short. Faced with the evidence of his own fraudulent accounting and the public relations nightmare, he had no choice but to settle. He was a designer, and he knew when a structure was condemned. The settlement was more than generous. I didn't just get half, I got a majority. The court, influenced by the sheer callousness of his neglect, made an example of him. Nye sold the house, the beautiful, cold, silent house of glass and steel. I couldn't stand to be in it another day. I took the money and bought a messy, rambling old farmhouse with a big garden and crooked floors, a house with character and warmth, a house that felt like home. I didn't see Liam again for almost a year. The next time I saw him, it was in a small, independent bookstore in the city. He was in the architecture section, just staring at the books. He looked smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, haunted look. He had lost the armor of his success, and the man underneath was hollow. NHE saw me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Liam, a flash of anger and resentment. But it vanished, replaced by a weary resignation. "In Kate," he said, his voice quiet. "Liam," I replied, my tone neutral. Aurora was in a carrier on my chest, babbling happily. NHE looked at her, and for the first time, I saw something genuine in his eyes, a profound, aching regret. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Yes, she is," I said. NWE stood there in silence for a moment, two strangers who had once shared a life. "I don't understand how it all fell apart so quickly," he said, more to himself than to me. "It was a perfect design," and I looked at him, at the man who still didn't get it. "You designed a building, Liam," I said softly. "You forgot to design a home. A home has to have room for life, for mess, for noise. You can't schedule a baby. You can't put love on a blueprint." NHE had no answer to that. I nodded politely and walked away, leaving him alone among his books filled with perfect, empty designs. Life became a beautiful, chaotic mess. My farmhouse was filled with noise, with laughter, with the clutter of a life well lived. Aurora grew from a baby into a curious, vibrant toddler who loved to paint on the walls and dance in the garden. She was the center of my universe, a constant, joyful reminder of the strength I never knew I had. Then I started writing again, not just freelance articles, but a book, a memoir. It was a story about a woman who woke up from a beautifully designed dream to find herself in a terrifying reality. It was a story about finding your own voice, your own strength, and learning to draw your own blueprints. My brother, Mark, was a constant presence, a loud, loving, chaotic uncle to Aurora. He would visit on weekends, filling the house with his booming laughter and showering his niece with impractical, wonderful gifts. And one sunny afternoon, we were all in the garden. I was weeding a patch of unruly wildflowers, and Mark was pushing Aurora on a swing he had just built. Her squeals of delight echoed in the warm air. "You know," Mark said, his voice unusually thoughtful. "It's funny. He spent his whole life trying to build something perfect, something that would last forever, a legacy of steel and glass.